All right, guys, I think we're live now. So, hello, everyone. My name is Alicia. I am here on behalf of GMAT Club, and I'm here to welcome you guys to the MBA application walkthroughs. It's a 6-week series, and we are covering applications for top 25 MBA programs. So, we're doing this every Thursday and Friday for 6 weeks, and we feature admissions experts and admissions teams, and they go step by step through every aspect of the online application. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay updated and support us in organizing more events like this. Make sure you also like the video so that you can find more videos like this. So again, I'm your host for today. We are covering Duke Fuqua, and together with me is Jen. I will not attempt to pronounce this last name, but Jen T. She is the CEO of Aringo. So Jen has helped hundreds of people with their MBA applications, and she has a lot to share today. So welcome, Jen. It's so great to have you.
Yay! Awesome. Thank you so much, Alicia. I am very excited to be here. To be honest, like Duke Fuqua is absolutely one of my favorite schools. Don't tell anybody else. But this is one of my favorites because I do feel like this application has a unique opportunity for you to show who you are, and it really shows it in the different ways that they ask their questions. So excited to dive in. And so Alicia is going to be moderating. So if you have any questions as we go, please submit them. I won't be able to see them myself, but Alicia will help. And if you have a big question, she'll pop it into the chat, or she'll stop me as we go so that we can make sure that we're answering questions as we go. All right, so we'll get started. So I went ahead and went into the Duke Fuqua MBA page, and I went to admissions and I clicked on start an application. I would highly recommend that you do that for all of the schools that you're planning on applying to. And that's my first tip for anyone is go ahead and start the application process of opening up the portal. The one thing that will happen from here is when you open that up, you'll start getting email communications from the school, which makes it really exciting because they're trying to let you get to know them better, and they're going to send you targeted emails that make sense to you. So you'll get to learn a lot more, especially if they ask you about different clubs and activities that you're interested in. They'll send you tailored emails, as well as sometimes, depending on how early it is in the cycle, they may be even asking you to come for like a diversity weekend or a women's weekend. Anything like that might be happening. So like I said, go ahead and open it. There's nothing that should prohibit you from doing it or make you, like penalize you for opening it early. But that's kind of where we get started. So as you can see, they obviously have a lot of different instructions on this page. One is about the application, the reapplication, how do you submit it, the checklist, and after submission. So this, I won't dive in like too incredibly crazy here, but there is a lot of information to read. One big thing, and I don't know if Megan covered this in the previous session, but they are using plagiarism detection. And so some of these can not only be about using, other people's essays, but also potentially using AI and ChatGPT and other types of tools to write your application. So it is important that you open the application early and you write your own application. Some of those tools may help a little bit, but honestly, they're going to be so vague that maybe it gets you started, but it won't be submitting a winning application. So we'll continue on. If anyone is reapplying, there's definitely a couple of extra items that they want you to do as far as like a reapplicant request form. And sometimes specifically with other schools, they might, or with Fuqua and other schools, they will ask you to fill out a reapplication essay along with this year's application as well. And then when you submit the application, they're going to tell you exactly what to do. I'm going to go through at the very end and show us how to review and save your application. Man, have you ever applied for a job and totally forgot to like save the actual job description, and you get the call and you're like, oh my gosh, like all I have is my cover letter. What did I say? So, make sure that you download this application and make sure that everything that you put into it. Beyond that, they do have a checklist of everything that you'll need to be submitting as far as having a complete application. And then after that, they give you a little bit of instructions as far as what to expect beyond this point and where you go from there. So next, you will be starting the application by selecting which program you want to be in. The Daytime MBA is their traditional 2-year full-time MBA program. The Accelerated Daytime program is their like 1-year MBA full-time program. Not as many people are going to be applying to that unless you've already completed a master's in management. So typically most people are going to click the Daytime MBA. If these aren't the options, you might have opened up the Executive MBA or maybe a master's program application. So next, you're going to select the round that you are going to be applying to. And I know that this is a mundane task that I'm kind of talking about, but what I want to tell you is that, like, let's say that you start the application with early action and September 7th is like coming right around and you're like, oh no, I'm not ready. Don't worry, just go back into the application and change it to round 1. This, whatever you select here for right now, is not a big deal. What it does matter is what you select before you submit your application. So do make sure it's the right date and application round. But for the most part, like, don't feel like this is obligatory that you have to submit by that date. You can just change it. Okay, so after we do this, it's going to give you some additional information that they're just essentially saying you're certifying that you are the person, and they give you more details about the program. You are going to enter your name to sign the document. Yay! And again, there's going to be a couple of different things that they'll talk about. You get to select the different academic areas that you're going to be most interested in. And so we'll go through that in just a second. But this is something like, if you are previewing this application before you actually go to submit it, you'll realize, oh no, like, what concentration am I going to choose? I don't even know what they have. And so you can take this opportunity to say, like, okay, I know that I need to figure out which concentrations or certificates or what part of the academic path I'm most excited about. So I need to put that in my application so you know what to go and study. So again, another great reason for starting ahead of time. And so the other thing I would say about this, right? Like, so you can do certificate of academic excellence, like in finance or health sector management, which is really an exciting part of Duke, Fuqua, because they have almost like a health management career track. If you click something here and it changes later on, this is not set in stone for your entire time at any of these schools. So just know that, like, yes, I'm going to click on one of these, but it's not something that's permanent that you're going to have to like commit to. Once you get in, they know that pretty much after the first semester, all kinds of fun things start to change. Again, you have dual degrees, reapplicants, connect with the community. And so this is a great way to also start getting email communications about something specific. So if you click this button and put yes, they'll start emailing you different information. But this is I'm doing a walkthrough, so I don't want them to start emailing me. So
Jeff,
I'm going to, oh, yep.
we have a question from Naman. He wants to know, can you apply to both the programs simultaneously in a single application?
Great question. So depending on which one it is, if it's a dual degree program within Duke, then, or Fuqua, then likely yes. If it's something else, and I think we'll get to this a little bit closer to the bottom, or maybe not. I wish I could answer this exactly right now, but I don't know for sure if they're going to make you do something else. I believe that Fuqua has done a really great job of making sure that so like if you click yes, then it asks you which program you want to do your dual degree with. Say you want to do in the medicine, you've not applied yet. So they'll give you some additional instructions based on what you choose. So like the JD MBA, waiting a decision. So from here, most of the time, if you're doing a dual degree that is not still in the business school, then they will have you complete a separate application. Each school is a little bit different. And I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like they're going to need a separate application because of the fact that they already asked, what's your status of your application with them. All right.
And then follow-up question also from Naman. What about the difference if you wanted to do both the date?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got all excited.
No,
So
that's good information too.
you can only click one. So I'm going to take that as a hint that they're only going to allow you to apply to one, and you either fit this their requirements or you don't. So I would make sure which program you're wanting to be a part of, and then there is maybe a potentially at the end of the application. I believe I saw that they had like a question about that. Um, so we may hit on it towards the end. But if not, I think that you maybe watched Morgan's video ahead of this. She's amazing and very approachable. So you can always email the admissions team at Fuqua and they will definitely get back to you, whether that's an email or maybe sometimes a phone call to clarify what you're asking. Yes. So I'm sorry, Alicia. I'm going to start moderating too.
We have another question from Amali who said, can we apply for engineering management and the daytime MBA? I think that would be the dual degree stuff that you spoke about.
Yes, correct. So, okay. And I don't want to get anybody too dizzy, but are you applying for a dual degree, yes or no? So if you say yes, then you can select it here. If you're wanting to do engineering management, it's not in this drop down, but there may be another way. So the best thing is to just ask, follow up with Duke to find out exactly what they're wanting to, whether it's possible or not, because I don't see that immediately in this application to give you that honest answer.
No problem.
All right. Okay. So any other questions from that part, or can we move on to personal background?
I think we're good for this section.
Awesome. Okay. So as we continue, you'll see that you'll be, giving a lot of your basic information here. I just wanted to make sure that they knew that I was doing this for GMAT Club. And this is all basic stuff. If you had some sort of question about what you should or shouldn't be putting, let's say that you have you have more than just a first name and a middle name, and you need like something's going on there with a surname, then you can always ask or try to fill in extra, like more names in one blank to make it happen. So beyond that, you will fill out your mailing address and your email address. So here's tip number 2. I would highly recommend, if you haven't started this process yet, to create your own like free email account that's related to MBA applications. And so for me, it would be Jen, MBA 2023. It's that simple. But the reason I would do that is because you're going to get a ton of emails. And so it's way easier to navigate, search, and know where to go looking for things if it isn't cluttered in your work email, your school email, or the email that you're using on a daily basis as your personal email. The other thing that I like to say is, like everything I use right now is Google. So if you want to use Yahoo for your applications, then you can be logged in all the time with multiple accounts and they don't get mixed up. Anyways, so that is my piece of advice here.
I wish I knew that before.
I know. You get so much stuff. It's a lot, but it's way easier to sift through. Okay, so next it's going to ask you about your phone numbers. Obviously, like most of us now are at this point, like we really only have like a cell phone, but go ahead and put that in there. Opt in if you want for text messages. Now they'll ask for your LinkedIn, WeChat, or WhatsApp. So some people could be very leery of this because of like, oh gosh, like this isn't ready. Don't worry, they're not going to look at that right now. But for the chat, they may try to reach out to you or communicate with you. So the only other thing I would do is make sure, if you choose those, to make sure your profile picture is, appropriate. And, not a beach photo or something like that. Then from there, there's going to be some biographical information. And you can definitely, if you have any questions about this, like obviously you can always ask questions with the admissions team specifically, but they are going to ask you about pronouns, gender identity, and any identification that they might need to know as far as addressing you as part of their community. Again, this is a very tight, knit MBA program, and so they want to make sure everybody feels comfortable. So put the information you feel most comfortable with. Then there's citizenship, and so some people, like maybe you're from India, but you have PR in Canada, like you'll want to put that dual citizenship here so that they can see that as well. And if you served in any sort of military, then you'll want to also mark that. Many of the US institutions really value military service, whether that's in the US or anywhere else, even in areas of conflict. Don't feel shy about adding it because, again, MBA programs are about embracing everybody from different cultures. And so if you, whether it was like a volunteer, I believe that there's some countries where, I believe I was talking to somebody from Africa a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that he had to do like compulsory service. So for like a year after graduation, he had to do service, but it didn't necessarily look like military service like everybody else's. So you can also include that potentially as well. Family information. Now, again, this is all information that you can share at your comfort level, right? So if you are married, they really want to embrace your partners. There's groups for partners, but this helps them get to know you a little bit more, and it also helps them with knowing, like, oh, we have a lot of people coming that are bringing their partners, and so we want to make sure that this community is being built and fostered. So you'll have be able to answer this, and again, like, I don't think that you have to worry too much about filling out this information if you felt like it was too personal or you didn't want to include it. It's not that big of a deal as part of your application. And so then the other big thing is we have a lot of couples that we work with at Oringo who are applying to the same schools. And so this is an opportunity to say, like, if your partner is applying to any program in Duke or at Fuqua, and that's okay to talk about, like, having a partner that's also applying. There's no issues with that. And then the Duke application specifically has a lot of affiliation questions. So we'll see them as we go throughout the application. So it'll ask you about your spouse or partner and if they have any affiliation with the university. How many children do you have? And then parental information. I had a client asking me about this. They're like, oh my gosh, Jen, why do they want to know like about my parents? And a lot of this is more statistical. So sometimes they're looking to see of, like, when they asked what the highest level of education was, they could be saying, like, as an applicant pool, candidates that are applied, 30% of them were first generation college or master's students, or like first generation for their family. So this is going to be more statistical. It's nothing that's necessarily a judgment on you. The only other way that this is impertinent is if there's some affiliation with Duke. Again, same deal with your other parent or guardian. And then, do you have any family ties to Duke? Again, there's a lot of affiliation questions within this application. If you don't feel like there's any issues, it's okay if you don't have affiliations with the university. They just want to know if you do have them. Okay, so optional, again, like, are you first generation college student? Did your parents go to college is really what they want to know. And so if it's a yes or a no, again, there's no discrimination. It's just to answer questions that they're asking to get to know people better, but then also to use for statistical information later on, likely for the Department of Education or for any sort of marketing purposes. They'll also ask you about low-income backgrounds if you're part of that. And then, do you have other living expenses that you're sharing that you want to share with the admissions committee, or lived experiences, sorry. So let's say that, maybe you are from a low income background, but maybe you're homeless right now. Like this, I mean, like, random things happen all the time during the application process. And I have read an application where the student or the applicant was actually currently homeless. And so, that's something that you might want to share with the admissions committee, or, that, you're in between living spaces, or even if you're maybe potentially like moving countries, or you're not employed right now because you're waiting for some sort of visa to go through, these are opportunities to share that here. If there was anything else specific about your background, this is a great place to use this. Um, but you don't have to fill this out if there was nothing specific or really that you felt like needed to be expressed in your application that wasn't already.
Cool. So we do have a couple questions on this section. I think this is one that's a little confusing for people.
Yeah.
So Juliet wants to know, I know you mentioned a couple of scenarios already in the lived experience section, but she says, can you please expand on what the admissions committee is looking for in the lived experience box?
Yeah. So again, that's going to be like, let's say, I mean, maybe you grew up in a foster home. You can share that information with the committee here, and anything that you put in here, I don't want you to feel like that you need to like share everything about your life or that you need to share nothing, right? It's all about your comfort level. But when you're telling an admissions committee something about you, obviously we want to put it into the right light. So let's say that like maybe you grew up in a foster home or something like that, and so you might say, when you look above, I don't have any parental I don't have any parents to reference because I grew up in a foster home. This gave me the opportunity to learn how to adapt to a lot of different situations, and to easily make friends or whatever it might be. Obviously, not everything is rainbows and butterflies, but if there was something to share about that experience, if you have a specific question, absolutely ask. I'm happy to answer, but it's it's more of like, like I grew up as in a military. I grew up in a military family, and we moved every 2 years. So you'll see, you know, a lot of that in my background, living in whether different states or different countries or whatever that might be as well.
Perfect. So Depeche is also asking, does it mean we can mention all the places that we have lived in, or is it limited to the living situation? So I think, yeah, what you said is it just
Yeah.
depends on how it affected you.
Yep.
Perfect. And then going back up, C Studio had a question about the contact stuff. So can you leave WeChat, LinkedIn, WhatsApp information blank if you actually don't have them at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. You do not have to fill out most of this information doesn't necessarily have to be filled out unless there's an asterisk. Especially like, sorry, that was in a different section, so I'm not scrolling up to it. But if you don't have them, then you don't have to list them. Those are things that will change when you get into the program. They'll definitely want you to have a LinkedIn and those types of things. But this is much more about communication. How can they get in touch with you? If it's WeChat, WhatsApp, or if you're okay with getting personalized LinkedIn messages as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And then one question from Andrew Hutton. Military here. Due to the nature of military service, I don't really have a professor to serve as a reference for the letter of recommendation. Will that hurt my application?
Oh, good question. So we'll talk about recommendations a little bit more in depth in a couple of tabs. But as far as letters of recommendation, they're not looking for a professor, they're looking for a professional reference. And so if that was your direct supervisor in the military, so it could be your squad leader, and I'm so sorry, like all of a sudden I don't remember any sort of like your commander or any sort of anybody who can speak to your professionalism, because again, like it's all translatable. If you were in the military, there's ways to talk about teamwork, absolutely. Supply chain management, operations, all of that can be communicated. And so they just need to kind of be able to bring it into the light of the business side of things. And so, again, like if you have a commander or somebody that you kind of directly reported to that can speak to your experiences and your character and your readiness for an MBA program, that's what they're looking for, not necessarily a professor.
Okay. And then back to LinkedIn again. Do the admission committees trace the history of LinkedIn and other social platforms?
I would, so this is kind of a gray area, right? Like, so if we're talking about like what it currently is, that's what they're usually going to be looking at if they looked at them, right? When it comes time and you're admitted to the MBA program, you do have to submit for a background check. So if there's something that comes up, and I mean, like something suspicious, and then they decide to do some research, and I don't really even know about doing like a trace history. I'm going to say that they don't have a lot of time to do that. So unless there was something that created a red flag for them to go and do this type of research, and even maybe the red flag of that might even say this is too questionable, like let's not admit this person. Or they would reach out to clarify, or if it comes back on your background check, then it comes back and they ask for an explanation to talk about things. But I don't think that they're going to be looking at if you were in a legal situation where they go back and say, I know that you posted a picture that you deleted from Facebook back in 2020. So I don't think that that's what they're looking at. They're just, looking at what it is for face value today.
Perfect. That makes sense.
Any other questions right now?
I think that's everything. Or one thing that Dipesh has also asked at the start, you mentioned we cannot use ChatGPT for the plagiarism issue. Would it be okay if we use ChatGPT for simple things like fixing grammar or rephrasing sentences?
I would say as long as it still has your authentic self in it, there's, an opportunity for that. I mean, like, let's just be honest, is I have limitations with my knowledge of all the chat GPT AI materials out there. But what I would say is that obviously don't let anything fill anything out in your actual application portal. If that has tags or anything like that, like they could maybe potentially track that kind of stuff. If you were to ask ChatGPT to rephrase something, then you'll want to copy and paste that into the Word doc. And then obviously, I also say that if you ever have a Word doc, you want to make it a PDF so that they can't see the history of everything. So they won't see your old versions or anything like that. So I think like if you're doing something light in that way, it's not bad, but don't do that for your entire application because you'll just end up with a string of random sentences.
Okay, perfect. That is really helpful for this section. I think we can move on.
Okay. So again, like Fuqua has a lot of really independent sections that are not the same as other MBA applications. So they have an MBA interview section that's going to talk about their different options for interviewing. I think we could definitely get bogged down in this section for a while, but I don't want to answer like a whole lot of questions about like how do you do open interviews and on campus and that kind of stuff. But just know that Duke has several different ways that you can interview with them. One of them is an open interview period where if you apply, or you can actually go into the system and say that you want to do an open interview, which means that you are getting interviewed before you've submitted your application. And so you would select this as part of this process, and I will show you where you do that. Then the next question, the other option would be doing an on-campus interview or an interview by invitation. Okay, great. So Duke shows you that they're going to have these specific weekends: Veteran Symposium, Women in Leadership, the Duke MBA workshop, or Pride Weekend. So if you're attending during any of these programs, you have the opportunity to be interviewed in person during this event. So if you are planning to attend any of these, then you can opt for this on-campus interview. The other way to be interviewed is by invitation. You submit your application to one of the many deadlines that they have, and then you will be selected and offered an interview if they would like to move forward. So here's where they'll ask you to complete your interview during open interview or during on campus. This is going to flag for the admissions committee to be looking for you as far as like an applicant to say like, hey, we need to, and I don't want to say prioritize over others, but they want to make sure that if you're going to be attending an event, that they're holding a spot for you to do your interview, or if you're going to be doing the open interview, that you are letting them know to expect your application. So once you do this, it'll be flagged on your application in the system. as well. So you can say yes, and then you select how you want to do that, and then hit continue, and be able to kind of move on to the next step. Any questions about these different interview options?
Yeah, is there any, like, I guess, benefits or downsides to choosing any of these options?
Yeah. So a lot of the times I'll talk to candidates about what is different about them. So if you're a female in leadership, if you're a veteran, if you belong to the LGBTQ community or diversity group, then these events are catered towards recruitment for making sure that they have a diverse class. So if these events are happening and you get invited, you have the opportunity, well, and you just, it's either you're invited or you opt to attend. So there might be some differences. Some of those events are typically going to be by invitation only, or you would have to like essentially kind of do some things to get invited. But by attending those events, you're going to get a lot of personal one-on-one time with students, with professors, and people that make you feel comfortable being part of this community. And then it's also going to technically put a little bit of an earmark on your application if you attend one of these diversity events, because then it's showing that you're a diverse candidate. So I would say there's definitely a benefit to that. So if you can, obviously definitely do that. And especially if like Fuqua is like in your top 3, I would definitely do it, right? Um, but I don't want to say that it puts everybody else at a disadvantage. So, because obviously not everybody can travel to North Carolina or to the US to be able to do these interviews or weekends. And so the other advantage of that is for you to make sure you're filling out the application, checking the boxes that you're interested in getting contacted and that you're interested in specific clubs and activities. So if you have the ability to do it, do it. And if you don't, then use other ways to interact with the community at Fuqua.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so now the fun part. Academic history. And I feel like this is the hardest part of most applications is entering in your academic history. Because not every school is created equally, not all classes are named the same thing, and obviously like GPA, CGPA, rank, all this kind of stuff obviously leads to a lot of gray areas or questions. So I do feel like Duke has done a good job of trying to lay things out as far as like what they're expecting in these different areas. So um, if you have transfer credits, study abroad, or listing multiple degrees or future degrees, they're going to want to have a transcript. Same thing with international students and applicants. So, and this is a lot of information, but essentially what you're going to get from this section is that if you earn credits towards GPA from any institution, you need to put it in the, like you need to submit it as part of your academic history, or or you'll also need to have a transcript for them, right? So sometimes people have completed, like maybe like they took after you graduated, you decided maybe that you'd do like a master's in data analytics and you took one class but you didn't finish. You don't have to include that. That's what I'm saying. But if you like got a degree or got received grades, then those are the things that they're going to want to have, especially if they show up on your undergraduate degree, which includes study abroad. This is by far one of the hardest parts of the MBA application process sometimes is gathering transcripts, which is just a task. It's not writing applications. It is simply a task that you need to be prepared to do ahead of time so that you're not rushing around the last day of the application focused on this technical piece instead of like worried about making sure everything is spelled correctly in your application.
Okay.
So they do accept unofficial transcripts. So you'll upload them to the system. So it doesn't mean that it has to come from your actual university. If you have the official transcripts that you received, or that you can get electronic copies of them or something like that, then this is going to have all the specifics of what they're looking for these unofficial transcripts. So they technically need to be complete. They need to show the grades you made in each one of these classes, what the classes were called, the credits you received, and they need to be able to see your cumulative GPA across the different semesters or quarters, whatever it might be. And they also need to be able to see what your final degree was and what it was awarded in, right? And so you'll see here, like if the degree wasn't conferred on your actual transcript, but you got a separate piece of paper conferring it, then that's what they're going to be looking for. So then this is the other part for Duke specifically. Every school does this different with the GPAs, but they want you to make sure to put things in the GPA scale that is being used by your institution. Do not try to convert it to a 4.0. They know that not all schools, again, follow the 4.0 rule. So don't try to, be like, what's a 7.9 out of 10 comparatively on a 4.0 scale? To be honest, when you submit all this information in your application, it goes over to a data processing person. And that person is going to comb through all of your application and fill in the information into their own rubric at each one of these schools. And they're going to have an academic score for you. So you don't have to necessarily worry so much about like, oh my gosh, like, should this have been an A or an A minus? I don't know. Just put A. If you failed the class, don't put A, right? Like you can get that kind of idea of things. But, that's what they're looking for in this section. You add your institution. Usually it's going to be pre-populated. If there was some reason that it didn't show up, then you'll have to kind of contact them to figure things out exactly. But they should have every institution. As you can see, Barilla Institute of Technology is like one of the Indian schools, so it's here, right? And so you want to write the full name, the country, dates attended, level of study, and then they will have you scan the copy of your transcript and put it in here. I'm not doing that part, but before I leave this screen, any questions about adding an institution? I think I might have done this already. Well, if I spell correctly, it's only because you're watching. So I went to the University of Georgia, go Bulldogs in Athens, Georgia. I actually thought I had already added this in, but maybe I didn't. And I'm just going to make some dates up, right? Oh, so I was there for like 15 years. They're going to ask you, even if it was undergrad, what degree you got, when was it conferred? I'm just going to make everything easy. What your major was, if you had a second major. I am a very eclectic person with cultural policy and anthropology. And then a 4.0 on a scale of 4. I'm smart as well. And I was ranked 1 out of 1. Get excited. And then, yes, English is the primary language. So if I didn't click that, it may give me something else about like needing to take a proficiency test or something later on. But just know that that button is there. Is your undergrad conferring degree? So this is asking if this institution I listed here granted the degree to me. So if I was a transfer student or something like that, and I attended University of Georgia for only 2 semesters, but I got my degree from Harvard, then I would say no. Okay, then I will save it. You can upload your institution, whatever you would like. Any questions on this section for academics?
I think not yet, but we have a couple questions on things that we covered before. So Susan is asking, would you recommend a virtual open interview or waiting to be invited? I think we did talk about this a bit.
Yeah, so I mean, if you can do the open interview and this is like, again, if Fuqua is like one of your top schools, then definitely do it. You're going to be putting your best foot forward. Some people prefer to do this. I think it's really up to you and personal preference. Some people would say like, oh, I'm not super confident. Okay, let me tell you who should do open interview. That might be the better thing. is if you have questions about your background. Kellogg does this too. Kellogg will also do open interviews, or they'll allow everybody to interview. Tuck will do this if you meet it by a certain deadline. But essentially, they're giving you an opportunity to present yourself to the committee a little bit like unbiased, right? Like, so let's say that your GPA was low or your GMAT or GRE was low, then you give them an opportunity to essentially fall in love with you. And that's what the open interview can do. And I think, again, it really needs to be that, like, Duke is your number 1, 2, or 3 school to be able to do this and really do it well and be able to make it to the next step.
Okay, I think that's very helpful. And then Sondoria, I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, but wants to know approximately when would the eligible events such as Women's Weekend or Diversity Weekend be posted or advertised? And would you recommend just checking the website periodically? So I know that you said at the top, start your application, set up the email. Is there anything else that people can do?
Yeah, so if you know that the school is going to be hosting these events, then you want to look into them. Like, maybe you heard from somebody else that they're going to be hosting things, and you want to make sure that you've already registered for it or shown your interest in it. That's a great thing to do. Okay, so what I did is, and I know that I'm not sharing this specific screen, but if you click on these events within the application, they'll either take you to the actual event or they'll take you to more information about it if it's not planned yet. I went for the women's one, and I don't see anything specifically about the actual event here yet, but this is where you would find more information, is by clicking on this link, the Veterans Symposium. Again, I'm sorry, like when I'm doing this, it doesn't necessarily show it, but you can also look at their events, though they do have event details on this page for the Veterans Symposium. I'm so sorry, I have hiccups. So some of them do have information. Oh, actually, the women's leadership one does as well. At the top, there's an event details tab, and it'll tell you that the women's weekend is November 9th through the 11th of 2023. So that's, find out more information from that. Or if this is at any other school that you're interested in, look at their list of events. Sometimes they'll let you toggle like women's events, diversity events, veterans events. They'll give you a couple of things to choose from.
Okay.
Any other questions?
One more all the way back to the background tab. Are there downsides in disclosing dual citizenship during the applications? For example, if you have a non-US passport, are you considered to be an international applicant?
Yes. So you'll have to answer that question about like where your citizenship is. So unfortunately, that's not going to be like an avoidable question, but if you do have dual citizenship, that is something that could add to your profile, as well as adding to your, like, let's say that I don't know why I'm having a hard time choosing something, but it'll let you start to answer these questions, right? Additional information. Then it'll start to ask you about identifying yourself as any specific type of group. And this one specifically is more tied towards like people from the U.S. But yes, and I feel like this kind of goes back to highly represented backgrounds. So people will. This is part of the application, but it's not the only thing that they look at. You do want to make sure you put in your citizenship. They're going to find it anyways. It's going to be required for you to submit your application. So I know that it's not super fun, but if you do have dual citizenship for another country, you want to put that in there because that's something unique about you. And then it makes them be like, India and Belgium, like, tell me about that, right? Like,
Right.
It could become a conversation piece.
Okay. And then back to our transcript and GPA stuff. How much do admissions officers dive into a transcript, like even if your GPA is pretty good?
I would say that they're going to be looking at specific courses. And this is, again, like where the person who inputs the information from applications, they'll be looking at specific classes. And when we go into this next section of academic history, coursework, sorry, the next tab, they're going to ask you these specific classes. These are the ones that these programs are specifically interested in, and that's what they're going to look at. So let's say that like you filled out like calculus that you got a C. This might make them go back and look at your other math classes and how you did, or to see if like you might not have done well in calculus, but you did really well in discrete math. Like, I don't know. Or like you had a little bit of an oopsie and for a semester or something happened, or maybe you had a medical emergency, something like that. When something is kind of ticked off in this specific section is when they may go back and look at things for other support of, oh, yep, I can see here that even though they had a C in calculus, they did really well in every other like mathematic course or scientific class, whatever it might be, that is of concern for them. So you'll put this here. Okay, so I think we jumped to coursework, but any other questions, Alicia, before I move to the next thing?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, so welcome to the coursework tab. And so I know there's so many other tabs to go through. I'll try to be a little bit faster so that we're not running out of time. But again, these are the classes they're most interested in. If you have a low grade in one of these, this might be a hint that you need to fill out the additional essay of like anything else you want to share with the committee. You may say, you'll notice that my grades in calculus were low, but I was able to recover from this by getting A in every other math class, or you'll see on my transcripts where this semester I had low grades. It's because I caught COVID, or I had mono, or some sort of emergency, whatever it might be. You want to, show the committee like, hey, I know that this isn't stellar, but there was something else going on. And so if you don't share that information, then it goes back to this like whole like regular shtick of like somebody's going to look at the committee, they'll be like, well, maybe they were just playing video games all the time. No, that's not what's happening. So
Chris says, what if I passed out of calculus with AP courses back in high school? I assume you would just write that in there.
Yeah, I think that you could be able to, you may be able to enter multiple course grades by using the comma or 123% or transcript section above. So I think that you could just maybe potentially put AP. That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. It might be worth testing some and see if they let you put it in there. Advanced placement, maybe it does. And so if it lets you stay with it, yay. If not, then that's a great question again to send to the admissions committee. And there may also be, there's not additional information on this page, but most schools will also have like an FAQ page for their applications found on the website. So you can also look for the FAQ before you contact the admissions team and kind of be like, I looked everywhere for it, but I couldn't find it. Let me know what I need to put in here. Okay, so this is where like the additional coursework is like, so if you're currently enrolled in any sort of program, or you will be receiving a degree in the future, or like you're completing a degree, whatever it might be, you can put those in here. I think Morgan, maybe somebody else was saying this earlier. I can't remember who was doing the presentation. Maybe it was in the Wharton presentation. But, sometimes if you didn't do as well in an academic class, you go back and retake it, and maybe you're not retaking it until you're starting to do MBA applications. So you'll want to put that course here, like I'm retaking calculus. Here's the calculus course, like who it's from, the credits, and the date that it ends, so that you can add that in here and the committee can expect that to be happening. Perfect. And then anything other than that you have as far as, Coursera classes, certifications, those types of things, you can add them here to the additional file.
All right. And then question from both Julia and Susan. So Julia is an accounting major. Do I have to fill in all the grades I had in all my accounting courses? Because I think that would be a lot. And then on the flip side, Susan says, what if you have none of these in your coursework?
Yeah. Okay. So lots of great questions. Okay. So if you have multiple, you can use the commas to add them in, Or if you are an accounting major, essentially they're going to want kind of like the basics of accounting. So the same thing that regular business majors would have had to take, whatever that normal level is, put that in here. They'll be able to see the rest in your transcript. You can always do so much more if you want with all the commas. If you do not have these, that's also another opportunity for you to submit this optional essay of like anything else that we need to know, because obviously this is something that's important to them. It's not a requirement to have all of these, but like, let's say that you have a computer science degree and you opted out of these, or you didn't have to take them, but you have plenty of other courses to help support the fact that you have mastery in these areas, or will be successful in it. And let's say, like, because the thing that an MBA program is looking for people from all walks of life. If you were doing like early ed education, you might not have taken some of these classes. You might not have taken finance, statistics, accounting. So it's not necessarily something that counts against you, but you can always, if you feel that you're not showing your best foot, or you feel concerned about not having these, then you'll want to do the additional essay.
Gotcha. Okay, I know that we're kind of running low on time, so
I'm so sorry.
Maybe Jen, you can jump through the next couple sections quickly, and then everyone else can continue submitting comments, and then we'll just go back to the questions that are interesting at the very end.
Yes, sorry. Poke me along. Okay, test scores.
Got a lot of questions.
Test scores. Okay, so again, it's going to tell you everything you need to know about test scores, any sort of waivers, anything like that. Essentially, Duke Fuqua is not waiving test scores for the full-time MBA program this year, so you don't really have to worry about that. You add your test in here. You're going to be manually adding this. You'll put in the test date and the percentiles, etc., throughout here. And if you have your test taker ID, that's what's going to help them. So you're going to be self-reporting this. And it's the same way for the GRE as well. You'll self-report, and then you'll have your scores sent to them. Sometimes, so this is different by school. Some schools will require that you send them officially your GMAT score or GRE score. Some schools will say it's okay to self-report. We're going to check it in the background. So they can all log into the MBA.com website and verify your score. It's way easier if you give them your ID because otherwise, sometimes last names, first names, everything doesn't match up, and it's a bit of a fun, like, where's Waldo moment of trying to find and search for people. So just make sure that you're providing that ID if you can. Okay, professional experience. So this is an opportunity, again, to show that everybody like what you've done and what you've accomplished. So they're going to be looking for your employer information, the title that you had. So is it your current organization? You're going to put the name in, the country and city and C. These are asterisks because they need all this information. Then you'll be able to kind of tell them what your position was, what your ending position was. And again, like anything that might be different. So sometimes position and title are different. So you might want to put that in there. So like analyst 1 versus like you're actually called like the team leader or team supervisor. So like, but you're actually like an analyst. So you might want to be able to put that in there so that they can say like, okay, technically, like if we call EY later on, they're going to say that you were an analyst 2, but you had the role of being team lead, whatever it might be. So you want to be as factual as you can because this is going to come back later on in the background check. They're going to want to be able to contact these employers after for the background check again. So if it's your current employer, some things kind of change here. So start date, your salary, anything like that, you want to try to be as factual as you can because, or as close to the dates or the salaries. So if you're making $35,300 when you first started, then it's okay if you put $35,000, right? but you can't put that you made 65,000, right? So this, difference is there. You need to be as close to the amount and the month and the year that you started somewhere, because that's, if things start getting wonky or suspicious, that's when they start digging into the background a little bit more. And they will contact them to verify your employment as part of the background check. So the next thing is, again, they want to know about your leadership, and then briefly describe your role and responsibilities. I would say that for the most part, this can come from your resume. I would not copy your description from like the handbook or your offer letter or whatever it might be. This should be really more from your resume, but hopefully you have that done already and you can just copy and paste it. Another tip might be to actually put this information into a spreadsheet as you're doing it, because if you're applying to multiple schools, they're going to want all this information every time. And if you put it in a spreadsheet, it makes it a lot easier to copy and paste these organizations' phone numbers, addresses, etc. But yeah, so I didn't save that, but I think we're going to be okay right there. So the MBA programs, they want to know if you have any breaks in your employment. Obviously, with COVID, there's plenty of people who have had breaks between, not being able to work in general, or layoffs, the tech layoff, like anything that might have happened. You just want to share that with them. That you'll notice between January of 2019 and August of 2020, I was unemployed because of X, Y, and Z. And then let's say that you had to take a break to take care of a family member. It's nothing bad. They just want to know so that they don't make any bad assumptions. It's always better to explain than to have anybody guessing. So Fuqua is very specific that they want a one-page resume. So make sure that you are including that. They'll also make sure that you have listed anything that your employment, volunteer positions, and again, they'll say what parts they want, your responsibilities starting with the most recent position, etc. You'll want to upload that here. So you can choose a file, and then so you can essentially choose any. I recommend a PDF. Okay, so then they'll talk about career focus and experience. So, they're going to ask you, and you're going to make the best guess that you possibly can. So I work in MBA admissions consulting. I'm not necessarily I'm not an MBB consultant, but I'm going to put that. So which of the following closely matches your current job function? So you can, again, try to match it as close as possible, but it's not something that they're going to come back and be like, you said you were in general management and you're an accountant. So it just depends on what you feel like most closely matches. They're going to ask about your future. And then, what do you want to do when you graduate? What kind of job function are you looking for? So this part should be closely related to any short-term, long-term goals that you mentioned in your application. And then they'll want to know the months of full-time employment at the program start date. So double check that it starts in August or September, that you're counting the months up to next year, in September of 2024. And then again, making sure that you're counting to make sure that you are answering this completely before they're looking for your management experience. So, again, estimating is fine. Use months and think ahead for what will be happening in the next year after you submit your application and before you start the program. Any sort of certifications, absolutely add those. Or if there's anything else, as far as women in business, there's quite a few different professional organizations or civic, so if you participate in UNICEF, anything like that, you want to list them here because you can't always put everything in your application. So you want to make sure that you can list it here as a data point. And then if your company is going to be sponsoring you, then you want to fill this out. I would say about 90% of the people going into the program will not be supported by their employer. If you are, I'm always happy to answer any questions offline as well. Okay, so recommendations. Alicia, am I still good? I'm just going to go.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so recommendations. There was a question about this earlier, but essentially they are looking for professional recommendations. Unless you work in an academia setting, you shouldn't be using professors. You shouldn't be using family members. You should be somebody professionally who has worked with you, supervised you, um, I mean, they obviously always want to have a current employer do the letter of recommendation. If by chance it's letting them know that you're applying to an MBA program could put your job at jeopardy. I've had a client, this happened to them, and it was a really sad situation, disappointing, right? He got fired after asking for a letter of recommendation. And so, if you feel like it's going to chance it, don't do it. Um, it's okay. You're going to talk to them about why. If you cannot use your current supervisor, you're going to make sure to say, like, because of, the current, volatile work situation or etc. I'm not able to ask my current boss as I feel like it might jeopardize my job. That would be it. That's all you have to kind of do. And then you're going to add the recommender's name, how you know them, the organization, their relationship, phone number, and email. And so they're going to want you to use some sort of professional organization email unless it's like a military or some other institution that will not allow emails to come through from outside organizations. And this is one way that they kind of like fact check and make sure that it's one, written by somebody else, and two, that they're coming from the company that you're saying they're coming from. So beyond that, they tell you how it's displayed. And this is a big question. People are like, oh, what do I click here? Do I waive my rights or do I not waive my rights? So I will tell you, if you waive your right, this means that your recommender feels like they can write whatever they want and that they don't have to feel like you're going to be looking at them later if you weren't admitted and saying, why did you write this? And so if you don't waive your right, you have the ability to ask the committee to let you see your letters of recommendation. Just, I would say that it kind of gives an air of mistrust. So I would always waive my rights, right? So if you really want to have the ability to see this letter of recommendation later, I would give your recommender a heads up and say, hey, I just want you to know that you might see that it says that I didn't waive my rights because I want to be able to access this later for X, Y, and Z reason. And it could throw up a flag for the admissions committee too. But there have been moments where people are nervous that their recommender is going to write something bad, or a recommender is afraid to write anything because they feel like even if they had constructive feedback, which every recommendation letter is asking for, then they'll feel liable and they might not write something very good, or they might not write anything worth value. So just a piece of information there. So the next part is leadership experience and community involvement. This is really important to Fuqua. What you need to know about this section is they're looking for parallels in your current or like past academic life to draw to how you will be a student and community member at Fuqua. And I mean, like, they have like a big thing of like Team Fuqua is like, they're a family, they're a community. So anything you can do to share this experience of like how you embrace others and work across different cultures, anything like that, you want to use this section to do that. So you can add the activity, the role, and then kind of what you did. Again, this can come from your resume, and especially if you didn't feel like you had enough room on your resume to include all of these things, you can use this. I would say I wouldn't go back too far, right? So if you have a lot in your professional life that you're involved in, you don't necessarily need to go back and list everything from college. But then from the reverse, let's say as a professional, you're already working 80 hours a week with a commute and you can't really do anything, then you want to kind of reach back to college and say, I was head of this, or I organized this festival, anything like that. And also know that I know, like, specifically with our Indian clients, a lot of them say like, oh, I don't have a certificate to share that I like did this volunteer work. It was just on my own. You don't need to show any sort of certificate or verification for your volunteer experience or club experience. So just know that, like, if it's something you did and it was worth like it was something you were excited or passionate about, add it. And then you can just say like, mentored a school age kid every afternoon for X amount of hours or whatever it might be, and put that in there. Okay. So next is the MBA essays question, section. So they do list a ton of information here for you to read and review. Again, there are the 25 things that they're looking for, plus some short answer essays. GMAT Club will be having a Duke Fuqua essay deep dive on Monday. So tune in for that, because I will not be covering it very much here, but I'll just say, like, obviously you want to make sure you're doing your best possible ability to, share everything that you can in these applications that shows why you're a good fit for Duke. Do not copy and paste from other schools. Do not use ChatGPT. I mean, I wouldn't, but so this is your post MBA goals. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Again, they're going to be asking for Team Fuqua. They're looking at 25 random things. The biggest advice we give to our candidates for this is to kind of have personal, professional, and academic kind of mixed together, kind of like thirds. And it's okay if one has a bigger piece of the pie. But you want to address these different sections of your life so that they get to know you better. So, make it interesting, make it fun. Don't, use things that are pretty boring or something that everybody else has done, but don't overlook what makes you really cool. If you grew up in a family business, that's something that's really awesome. I know that I have a lot of clients that didn't think it was something worth sharing, but it definitely is. Like, that's something MBA programs are really excited about. So, dig deep and have fun with it. Don't feel too self-conscious about it. Okay, so again, essays here. Again, I'm not going to dive into them because that will be part of another walkthrough on Monday. So get excited about that. Next is their marketing section. So whatever you put in this section for the application, it's not going to be used against your application, right? So if you tell them that I'm applying to Columbia, which is a school that's ranked higher than Duke, or I'm applying to, let's see, maybe like University of Washington, which is lower ranked, there's nothing that's going to be used against you. What they're trying to do is find out who their peer institutions are, and people that are interested in Duke are also interested in other schools and what they have in commonality. Beyond that, they want to ask you, and so I think we were talking about this earlier, that if you wanted to be considered for another program while you're completing this application, you're kind of leery and you're like, oh, I'm going to apply to the daytime program, but I know that I'm also open to being part of the Master's in Management program. You can click here to other programs you would be open to. Let's say that you're closer to 30 years old and have 10 years of work experience. You may want to say that you're also open to the executive MBA program or an online program, something like that, to give yourself some more leeway as far as like, I really want to be at Duke, and if it has to be through a different program, I would be okay with going to this master's in business analytics, right?
Mhm.
Double check these because some of these are not in the US. I think one of the masters in business analytics is actually an international one. Oh, MMS, and I believe this one is in China. So just double check what you're checking off there. How did you hear about Fuqua, right? So this gives you a little bit more of, again, background on you and how you have been engaging with them. And so sources of information, again, this is just for their marketing team to try to be better. Nothing will be held against you, that kind of thing. So I also mentioned this earlier that Duke has a lot of questions about affiliation. If you have any affiliation with Duke, Duke Health, or employment, etc., focus in on these sections and make sure that you're filling them out completely with the relationship and everything. But for the most part, I think most people are not affiliated with the school yet. Then the other part of this is that Duke in a great way, allows you to be considered for other specific scholarships. So the great thing about that is not only are there check boxes, but there's full descriptions of what each one of these are, so you don't have to go to a different screen to be able to look at them. You can just say like, oh, AmeriCorps, yep, that makes sense. Yep, I'm part of that. Or I have no idea what AmeriCorps is, so no. So that's a great opportunity to know that you can be considered for additional scholarships during the program. And then the conduct and honor code, essentially you're agreeing that you have read through their handbook and their honor code, and that you are abiding that as part of being an applicant, as well as when you become an actual student at Duke Fuqua. So you'll sign that. And then the next spot is another really fun and exciting thing. So Duke also gives you all the opportunities for when you could get an application fee waiver. Like if you attended the walkthrough earlier today, you could have gotten a waiver for the application fee. Yay! So it'll say like, are you qualified for this? And then what event qualifies you for this? So I attended X, Y, and Z, and that's how I got the waiver. When you do that, you put this in and then continue, and then they will be able to check and validate your fee waiver, and then you'll go through the next step. So the last part of the application I want to make sure that I do cover is the review. So obviously I didn't do anything of this application, so everything is read. But when you get done, you'll want to save, you'll click here to preview your application, and you want to, save it as a PDF, and then you want to spell check it. You want to have somebody else go through this application and also check it, as and make sure that all of your spelling is correct. There's nothing that you missed. But having people help you with this portion is important, because you've been buried in this application, and maybe your best friend or your mom hasn't, and so they can be like, no, this isn't right, or you're missing this, or X, Y, or Z. So that's the Duke Fuqua application in a very concise little box.
Awesome. That is super helpful, and great tip at the end of just like getting a fresh set of eyes on it with the application proof. A couple questions I think people wanted to know more about the recommenders. So Chris is curious, what would be more valuable, a current supervisor, which you've said is important, versus a past supervisor who knows you better and could probably write a better letter?
Yeah, and actually this is a really common question if you just switch jobs, right? So if you've only been working at a company for like 3 or 4 months, obviously your past employer who you've been working with for that you worked with for 3 years is going to be a better option. Again, if you choose that, just make sure to write that in that box as to why it's an exception. So again, you can have a really great recommendation letter from a past employer, and that'll be okay as long as you kind of show the justification.
Perfect. And Andrew is curious, can we provide more than 2 recommenders?
Not exactly. So let's go back to, if we go back to recommendations, you can't exactly have more than 2, I don't think. I think you can have 2 exactly. But if you know somebody who's part of the Fuqua community, like somebody who is an alum or a current student, they can fill out an endorsement form. So don't, like somebody who can fill out an endorsement form, don't waste a letter of recommendation on them. Use a letter of recommendation from somebody else, and have a third recommendation in your pocket. But I don't think that they want more than that. I mean, every school has their own saying about recommendations, but usually recommendations are like a little bit of a litmus test, right? Like, does this sound like what the person's telling you about their career, their growth, their personal like strengths and weaknesses, or does this sound kind of like off? And so there's not a lot of stock in the actual letter of recommendation, except for it's going to be something to kind of confirm or deny what you're sharing in your application.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then the last quick question. There was a section in the essays, I think, 25 things about yourself. I know that we will go definitely in more depth on the essay section, but Could you give some idea of like what's the spectrum of things that you think we could include here, and could you give a couple of examples?
Yeah. So one of them like could be like that I earned my black belt in taekwondo or karate when I was 8 years old, right? Like I was the only one, I won the national championship or something like that, right? Like some sort of personal accomplishment. And this discipline, the discipline from karate has continued throughout my life, or meditation or whatever. So like one thing I might say, like for me, is I was always the person in the class that got their desk moved from talking so much. I can't wait to be part of the Duke Fuqua community and be able to talk to everybody without any restrictions in the classroom. So, like those kind of things can be endearing and can be exciting. But, like you can also share things that aren't necessarily super happy. If you went through something that was traumatic, or courageous, anything like that, you can definitely share it. But it's something that's unique about you. So like saying that you played basketball might not be enough. So you want to add on to that, or like I was the only one in my Girl Scout troop to never actually earn any badges. Like I don't know, if there was something interesting about that, yeah. But whatever makes a personal story for you is kind of what they want you to use. There is a word limit, so it's a fine balance.
Okay, perfect. Okay, guys, I think we are pretty much far over time now, but it was a really great session and definitely learned a lot. Thank you so much, Jen, for being here. And if you guys appreciated Jen's insight and us for putting on this event, make sure that you like the video. We also posted kind of in the comment section, there's a link to Aringo's website and you can get another consultation. And then we have like more walkthroughs and stuff like that. The link is all in the chat. And Jen, is there anything else you want to conclude with?
No, just that, thank you so much for participating. Being here like gives you a leg up on anything, like learning things. Look at the other webinars. Go back to GMAT Club's YouTube channel, like them, but also watch them. And then if you have any questions or want to work with an admissions consultant, Aringo MBA Admissions Consulting is here, and I'm always happy to help.
All right, perfect. Thank you guys so much for coming, and good night, everyone.